Hello folks, welcome to the HS Tech channel. In this video we're going to configure, or at least look at, what you need to do to configure VTAM to talk to other systems through SNA over Ethernet. This is also going to take a very brief look at traditional sub-area type links through channel-to-channel adapters. This is not going to cover anything that might require an NCP, like any fancy things that you may be able to do on the MVS 3.8 systems with the NPU emulators. So we're not going to look at that. We're just looking at how to get this thing to talk to like an OS2 machine, for instance, through SNA. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as mate here, and we're going to look at the config files for VTAM. So this is a little bit tricky because the manuals that you're going to find for VTAM nowadays are pretty much completely inapplicable to this old VTAM 4.2. If you can find older VTAM manuals, you're going to want to use them. Alternatively, you can just sort of copy what I've done here, which is honestly probably the best way to do it. But before we do anything, we actually have to look at what we've got. So you're going to see we have a lot of files here. We have some VTAMLST files. These are your actual VTAM configuration files. We have some assembly sources, and we're going to take a look at all of these. We have some macro libraries. GCS is of course a group control system. It's a rec script that GCS can use. And we have a profile xedit, which doesn't really have anything to do with VTAM. And we have a few load libs. Now, the first thing that we have to do here, before we really do anything, is we have to understand how VTAM starts up. So VTAM runs under something called GCS, and if we do profile GCSZ, you can see what this is going to do. It's going to assign a bunch of PF keys, and it's just going to invoke VTAM exec. Oops. Of course, this right here, you can probably guess what that does. Now, VTAM, because it runs under GCS, has a command prefix for everything. You're going to see all that in a bit. But first, we're going to start where it all starts. The first thing VTAM reads is ATC con 00. This right here is a list of files that's going to be loaded. Now, you're going to see a lot of stuff over here in this column here, over on column 72. This is called the continuation character. You can put any character you want here, but this basically is equivalent to a backslash on a C preprocessor. It basically tells VTAM to go on to the next line. Look, you can have all this in one big long ugly line if you want, but we're looking at routes, cross-domain resource managers, RSCS, VSCS, which is like the VM Logon socket. I'm sorry, this is cross-domain resource controllers. This is VMRSCS, model, dial-in lines, channel-channel adapters, PVMG, don't worry about that, app-in classes of service, adjacent CPs, control points, adjacent CDRMs, AppC VTAM support, our Ethernet external communications adapter, and then, okay, a lot of people will just sort of copy my directions and they'll come up with an HSNet file. Of course, this is sort of like my network. Call it whatever you want. This is just a switch network definition. The more generified term would be SWNet. But all of these are VTAMLST files that VTAM's going to load. So then it looks at ATC STR00 VTAMLST. This right here is basically your core parameters. And it's important to note that you probably do need to copy all of this. Some of these I wrote comments for, and most of them I did not, but let's go ahead and walk through them because we're going to be here all night anyways, so we might as well get to it. What configuration do we want? Well, obviously 00, because we're using 00. What's our net ID? HSNet. Remember, SNA names go in the form of netid.host. You know, it's kind of unusual in that aspect. So that's of course our net ID. Our node type, this is a network node, which means it can do routing. Connection type, prefer app-in if we can. App-in is advanced peer-to-peer networking. This is basically automatic routing. Do we have a class of service table? Yes, so we need one of those. What's our host PU name? VMESA $PU. What's our host sub-area number? It's 1. Our SSCP ID is also 1. These right here generally should be the same. You cannot have duplicate host sub-area numbers. Sub-area numbers are loosely equivalent to IP addresses, if you could call them that. And the netid.hostid is more or less the domain name, if you could call it that. SSCP, boom, VMESA. This is just whatever you want the system name to be. Really what it is it's netid.sscp name is what derives the full name for it. Do we want this to be a gateway? Yes, we do. Do we want adjacent SSCPs to be defined? Yes. Do we want adjacent control points to be defined? Yes. I know this is kind of odd. These are basically the same, but I realize you apparently have to have both of them for this to work. There you go. Solicit CP sessions? Yes, you cannot do some types of routing for AppC without this. Do you want dynamic LUs? You better believe it. Okay, yeah, okay. And then most of these are just numeric. It's honestly just something that's kind of got to copy in, because without these, it ain't going to really work. It's just a little bit of a mess to sit here and explain all these parameters. But these are just like tuning parameters. You can copy these out of the example VTAM configurations that you see on the pre-made VM and MVS images. Okay, great. Now that we know this, what do we do with all those VTAMLST files? Not all of these are worth looking at. Like, some of these are ridiculous. Like NCP1, that one doesn't work. Whatever that one, that doesn't work. These right here, these are for token ring. At the wrong address. So we're going to start by looking at CDRM VTAMLST. Now this right here is the list of cross-domain resource managers. This is basically everything in the network. Some of these are fake, some of these are real. For instance, this ZVM 7.1 machine, this is just a modified ZVM that's been slightly modified to have some newer features. MVS old, yeah, VMESA 370. This is basically VMSP release 6. Oop, go away, Dermate. And of course, we gotta know what our net ID is, so all of these are hsnet dot blah 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 blah. Okay, but how does it know which one's mine? Because obviously, one of these, it has to pull out and actually say, oh yeah, this is my CP name, if you will. And it does. One of these is responsible for selecting which cross-domain resource manager you're using, and it's this right here. Your sub-area number has to correspond to your CDRM name. If not, you're going to get a nasty error about failed to activate own CDRM. Each CDRM needs to be unique, and it needs to have a unique sub-area number, as we already said. Okay? That's the gist of that. And we also need to have cross-domain resources. For instance, stuff that you can actually use. So, in this case, this right here is sort of a copy-paste that I have on a lot of different systems. So here's our ZVM 6.2 test system on the big iron. This right here, the way that I've configured this is kind of haphazard. You should probably do a more reasonable approach. I just sort of kind of went ham with it. This right here is the host name, and then this is the service. So VSCS is, of course, VTAM SNA console services, which is basically remote login through SNA. RSCS is, of course, Remote Spooling Communication Subsystem. That's just NJE networking. Down here we have a KIX instance and a PVM instance. Yes, PVM runs on VSE, in case you didn't know. We're not going to be talking about PVM, though. And then here's some other stuff. This right here is basically the automagic, if you will, list or resource for sort of app-in auto-searching. If it's not in here, it'll query this ILU1 resource, and this will be querying an app-in network, if that makes any sense. Okay, well, we also have adjacent systems. This right here is just a list of adjacent CDRMs. So if the network is unknown, here's what we can in theory reach. Note that we are not on this list. Also, this indentation matters. I'm going to show you what it is. There you go. That matters. If your indentation's wrong, it's over. And we're going to look at what the indentation needs to be on one of the other important files. So these are all adjacent CDRMs. Now, note that I don't have any non-mainframe systems listed, even though they can pretend to be CDRMs. I don't want this particular VTAM machine routing out to them because they're just slow PCs. You know, it's like a 486 or a Pentium. You know, it's not a big flashy mainframe. So we'll let the mainframe do all the work as much as it can. So if it wants to reach the ZVM 5.3 test system, okay, we have to go HSNet, ZVM 5.3. Here's our CDRM, and then it's also an adjacent CDRM. I know it's ridiculous and redundant, but it is what it is. There's also adjacent control points. Okay, this is important. You need to define these. Anything that uses a sub-area link, you have to have keyed into adjacent control point table. So here's our ZVM 6.2 test system. It's an adjacent control point. It is not a network node. If you say NN equals yes, then it's going to be presumed that you can have routing off of this. If you want to route through another network node, you need to plug it in here. So if your OS2 machine is a router and you're running communication server 2, here you go. Is it a virtual node? No. And then of course the net ID that it's on. If you want to route to another net ID, you need to say NN equals yes, net ID equals whatever. Alright. I need to start using F1 to redisplay these commands. Okay, now we're going to look at, let's say you want to have a channel-to-channel adapter link. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Now, what you're actually controlling, what you're turning on and off from the VTAM command line is the PU for the remote node. This is where it gets a little confusing. I shot myself in the foot by making the transmission group numbers, which is basically the route number. Those must be unique in the SNA network. So if I have a VM system talking to an MVS system, the link, the channel-to-channel link that they're taking has to be the same transmission group number. If they're different transmission group numbers, you're going to have a bad time. It ain't going to work. So, of course, we have our vBuild line. This is, of course, a channel adapter, vBuild. Here's our group. This right here is, you just got to have it what it is. And then each one of these is our line. Remember, each CTC has a coupled link to remote system. So we're going to look at our ZVM 6.2 link, which is on channel-to-channel adapter address E40 with a bit of a delay. We do want the missing interrupt handler. Should something just suddenly stop working, it won't just cause VTAM to crash. And the initial status is active, and we want 8 maximum buffers. Our PU on the remote system is a PU type 4. Okay, you can check your VTAM manual for the rest of these PU types, but for 99% of your stuff, you're going to want a PU type 4 if it's another VTAM system. And then the transmission group number is the path that's going to be keyed into your routing table, which is conveniently called path, hopefully, that will take you to that remote node. Okay, so in order to reach destination sub-area that ZVM 6.2 sits on, we have to go through transmission group number 2, okay? Note that nowhere in here does it actually tell you what the target sub-area is, okay? In order to do that, we have to look at path. This is the worst syntax ever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, okay? And then you gotta have 2 spaces over. Make sure you have your continuation characters. Okay, let's make sense of this. Let me find something worthwhile. Let's see, what's something that's easy to explain? I will just do any of them, I guess. So, here's what we do. In order to get to destination subarea 12, we have to take TGN 6, okay? So somewhere in our CTCA VTAM list, one of those has a TGN of 6. And there's a PU that's defined on our local VTAM system. That's like, hey, in order to get to, whatever XYZ system, we have to go through transmission group number 6, or this link is TGN 6. And then that's taken us to sub-area 12. So if we look at our list of possible control points, there they are. And if we look at our list here, what's sub-area 12? VSE ESA. Okay. And if we look at our list of channel-to-channel adapters and we scroll down here and we look for TGN6, you can see this right here is the VSE ESA line. This is address E46, PU type 4 because it's a remote VTAM, and then of course it's TGN6. So that's how that works, and it's not too terribly difficult to understand, but it's just the format is really ridiculous and really specific. The explicit routes are here, the virtual routes are here. If you want to do multi-hop routing, it's a little bit trickier, but the gist of it is that's basically the same, and yeah, that's all of that. So we have a few things left to cover. We're going to also take a look at how you get something served out. So in this case we're on VM, of course we want a login screen, so let's take a look at that. This right here is of course copied right off an IBM example. But you see down here, this right here, you can pretty much disregard this. If you want to vary the whole thing on and off, this is what you give to the vary command. This right here is our application. Now, this right here is basically an empty, now I call it an apple because, you know, it looks like one. But the empty Apple ID, not to be confused with your iPhone account, is essentially the socket, if you could call it, that something will bind to. And it will bind to the ACB name. So when VTAM starts, it also loads the VSCS module. The VSCS module has a assembly language parameter file, DTI user 0. We're going to look at that in a little bit when we look at how you reassemble a lot of this stuff. And it's going to bind into this ACB name called VM. And once that ACB name is bound, this Apple becomes active, and you can now sign on to the system. Of course, you have the exact same thing for RSCS. So when you do special message RSCS network start Apple ID ESA RSC, this will actually do something. Oops. That is supposed to actually do something, but oops. There we go. That's what you do. It's just there's no parentheses there at all. So that right there, that will tell RSCS, hey, I want to bind to that open ACB, and then once it's got it, boom, RSCS, you're now talking SNA NJE. So we have only a very few things left to talk about here. Don't worry about model. This right here is something that you're probably just going to want to ignore. These are just automatic definition parameters, so to speak. Okay, now let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about what everyone came to see. XCAs. Okay. This is the hardest thing you'll ever see in SNA history. It's this and the next file. So we have to define our vbuild group, of course, and then we have to define our port. Now the port is, of course, the channel unit address of our LCS. I should mention this is a 3172 LAN channel station. If I do a QE22, this right here, it thinks it's a CTCA, but it's actually a LCS. These are single address devices. I know TCP/IP LCSs, those are two devices, but with SNA, it's actually just one. So if you're on your mainframe and you run OSASF, you need to define this thing as an OSE. Okay? Not QDIO. VTAM on here does not support QDIO. Not even the latest version on VSE supports QDIO. It's a lost cause. So you're going to be using classic LCS, and furthermore, it needs to be in SNA mode. It can't be in TCP/IP mode because it won't work. Okay, and then our group. Do we want to answer inbound calls? Yes, I cannot stress this enough. If you turn this off, it's going to be a nightmare. Autogen, just plug it in. Call in out. Yeah, we want to be able to dial out from this. Do we want to be able to dial? Yes. Do we want dynamic PUs? Yes. Do we want dynamic PU extensions? There we go. And our initial status is active. So when VTAM starts up, this is going to be there. Now, let's look at the holy grail of confusing VTAM configuration. This is it. Okay. We're looking here at a link to an NT4 SNA server. The PU address is of course 1. There are 5 possible paths to get here, even though there's only one that's actually used. This is an app-in connection. This is not a CP to CP session because this Windows NT SNA server can't cope with routing. The remote CP name is this, NT4 serve. We do not want to disconnect. We do not want to, I think this is like late activation. We do want dynamic LUs, even though we have them all predefined here. This is the ID block, and this is the ID number. And don't worry, we're going to take a look at NT SNA server in a couple of seconds here. There we go, we want this active, 1496, this is literally just the MTU. You can use 1500, but you should probably use 1496. Max out is 7, that's basically the window size. MOTAB, IST, INCLM. You're going to need to find IST, INCLM assemble from something. You can find it in pretty much any OS390 image ever, and if you have access to a ZPDT with a ZOS, just pull it out of there. NetID, HSNet, there you go. Pacing is 7. Do not lower this or you'll just crash out. PU type is 2. Remember, what NT4 serve here is doing is basically pretending to be a 3174. That's what PU type 2 is. This right here is our sign-on screen that we're going to send it, and we're going to look at that. And then, of course, our vPacing is this. Okay, this is where it gets important. This is the path. Our group name is Ethernet group. This is the line we use. The dial number is as follows. This 0004. In configuring your SNA server, you're going to see something called a SAP address, SAP, Service Access Protocol, or something like that. It's probably set to 4 hex, so like 0x04. This is your SAP address. Don't ever change this. If you just kept your SAP address at 4 and plug in 0004, you're good. And this right here is the remote MAC. Now, as you can probably see, well, gee, isn't that a DECnet MAC address? Why, yes, it actually is. This is literally just a DECnet MAC address because this Windows NT server also speaks DECnet. And then down here, these are our LUs. These are, of course, terminal LUs because this NT4 SNA server is also doing Telnet 3270. And we're going to look at this all in a minute. Our initial status is active, of course. Our log mode is that, and our USS tab is this. Now, if we keep going, you're going to see some of these are a little bit more sophisticated. Like here's an OS2 server. Again, same old, same old. 080027, that's of course a VirtualBox VM. Here's another example of the ID block and the ID number. These need to be unique. I want to say they need to be unique. They don't have to be unique. I've had overlaps, but things get really flaky and you can't dial out from it. You'll get some sort of weird, mysterious failure. So make sure these are all globally unique. And please don't have overlapping CP names. You're going to have a bad time. Alright, here's our Windows 2000 server. Here's our NT 3.51 server. Here's just an NT4 VM. Here's an old PC I've got. Here's a NetWare, SAA NetWare with a unusually long MAC address because the characters look fat. There we go. Cisco router. Same old, same old. Now, some of these can do CP/CP sessions. This is important. If you have CP/CP sessions, you can have app-in with HPR routing. That's the important thing. Don't solicit CP/CP sessions if you don't know what you're doing, or you'll break your network. OS2 PC, this is a recurring feature here on the channel. This is an old Cyrix OS2 PC. Of course, you gotta love that good old 3COM MAC address prefix, and of course an OS2 VM. Okay, so the gist of this is you're basically making stuff that pretends to be 3174s. Now, let's talk about how you change that sign-out screen, because I know that there's a lot more stuff on here we hadn't talked about. And actually, we're going to take a quick look at AppC VTAM support. If you want AVS, you need this. This right here is your gateway AppC, or your AppC name, of course. So if you want to like do an AppC ping, this is what you're pinging: hsnet.vmescagat. AppC, yes, of course. This is for AppC. Mode tab, AGW tab. Okay, AGW tab. This is like the rarest file on the planet. I'll tell you where I found it. VMSP Release 6 object tape. I lucked out so hard finding that, but there you go. I can probably upload it somewhere, but it's AGW, of course, is the AppC VTAM support program command message prefix. So there you go, and all that is what you want. There's a bunch of assembly files we have to cope with as well. DTI user 0 is the configuration file, if you could call it that, for VSCS. So we'll take a look at that. Of course, set the ACB name to... Okay, no, this is actually all correct. The default's VN, so that's what you want. Do you want logo? Yes, definitely. Okay. IST, SDCOS, IC, ICLM, and all of these, and this, these are all basically, they come with VTAM. You can find them pretty much everywhere. USSN, this is your 3270 sign-on screen, because if we look at xdial02x VTAMLST, these right here are quote-unquote local terminals, so if you go to the Logon screen on VM, you do dial VTAM, it hooks you up to a actual, like a local terminal. Of course, you could also have dedicated SNA terminals hooked up to the system. These are just the, there's our sign-on table that we want, and then of course the unit address of that. Okay. USSS and USSN are the sign-on screens that you actually get. So This one has fancy 3270 graphics. Now we're going to go ahead and look at this because this is a little tricky. But this right here is the junk that gets thrown on the screen. What I recommend you do is, if you have a P390 and you want to run the VTAM ESA 2.4 ADCD, if you can find a CD of that, just run it and just edit the example. I mean, that's what this is. This is literally just the IBM pre-made example that you get on a P390 pre-built system, run on your flashy mainframe PCI card. But I can't really explain this too well in a reasonable amount of time. But the gist of it is that it's a 3270 data stream that gets put raw out to the terminal. Okay, up here, these are your commands that you can punch in. This right here is, of course, all assembler macros. But if we want to talk to our VSE ESA system, what we type in is VSE ESA. It's a logon command. It's going to have basic assembly language style parameters, which means it would be something like, or something like that. Okay, so our default application ID is, of course, this right here. I never changed it on VSE. It's still the default. So there you go. This is what we're talking to. Okay, and of course you need to have a here's the actual message buffer. And up here, here's your default L. That's definitely what you want. That's, of course, local. VTAM ESA, it's also local. Okay. This is different. Oops, sorry. For SNA logon screens, it's dumb, right? See, it's literally just ASCII. Well, I guess it's actually EBCDIC. But remember, this right here, 2 columns. You know, this is 2 columns of screen. This one right here is blah, 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 network qualified name. So this will literally just tell you what your terminal is, and we'll see this in a second once we connect through that NT4 server system. But this right here is basically all the reachable systems that I just plugged in here. Most of these are actually missing because I don't even have half the NVS systems in here. But it's pretty much the same. There you go. In this case, I don't have prefix names because it doesn't really matter. They're optional. And this is a little trickier to make because this is something you're going to want to make yourself. Okay, now how in the world do you actually change the logon screen? Where is this loaded? Well, if you look in your VTAM GCS exec, you're going to see that there's a global load lib parameter, and it's going to load a variety of load libs. One of them you're going to want to make, and you're going to want to write an exec to do it. Sorry, I got muscle memory burning out on me here. What I did is I wrote myself a Rex exec that's going to regenerate and just basically reassemble everything for me. So let's talk it through. You need to have disk 29A accessed at some form or fashion or some file mode, because disk 29A on all ACF VTAM systems on VM is, of course, very heavy macro libraries, because we need VTAM build. We don't need VTAM Mac, where it's just VTAMAC. We don't need that. We just need the build macros. We're going to assemble USSN, USSS, and USSX. Keep USSX the default that you pretty much get with VTAM. It's basically like a failover logon screen. If you see USSX, something's messed up. You'll know it when you see it. It's like this machine is not configured to properly display or proper communications, something like that. Okay, AGW tab, again, rarest file in the world. I'll figure out some way to put it up there. It's an important file. Not even IBM has even more, apparently. ISC, ICLM, ICSCOS, DTI user 0. Okay. We're going to erase the old load lib, and we're going to link edit all these. This is how you make a load lib, by the way. Is you just run link editor, and then boom, 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 load lib map, and then this right here will tell us oh my gosh, my mind just gone blank. Yeah, USS tab load lib. So here's everything that's in here. Now the default is, of course, PC VTAM. Well, at least it is here on a pre-cooked system. Of course, we're basically overriding all these, except we're not overriding A mode tab or RSCS tab. You can find these if you look hard enough for them. Don't try to override them. There's no point in doing it. Okay. And that's all the config files that we wanted, and of course everything else. There you go. pretty much all of these we've covered. Also, don't try to regenerate the DCSS. If you do this, you're going to have a bad time. So now, let's actually look at operating VTAM. So I'm going to log off of this, and of course I'm playing over TCP/IP here. So, there you go. Go ahead and log in as VTAM. Note that the prompt's different. GCS. Yes. We can no longer list our files. That's not a valid GCS command, but we can list our stuff. We can do VTAM dnet, ID equals VTAMLST. Well, what do you know? This right here, this is our CDRM and also our control point. You see it, there's CDRM and then control point. And then of course our SSCP, well, there we go. So most of these, it's not really going to matter. If we look at a remote machine, there you go. Active, active, not connect, because apparently nothing's connected right now. Who knows why. Here's a remote PU to an OS2 server. You see, this is a problem. Active doesn't mean connected. What I really need to do is actually... Oh, right, I can literally just demonstrate this on camera. I can connect to that ZVM system and cycle the VTAM link. I'll just restart it completely, and then there you go. So... that will, that's what it looks like when the other side restarts. It'll say, oh, route failed. Oh boy, whatsoever will we do? And of course, boom, it comes right back up. We got it. Recovery successful. Okay, recovery successful doesn't mean that something's working. This is probably the most misleading error message ever. It just means that something occurred. And of course, it's going to be inactive, and it's like, oh, we got to activate CDRM request on remote side. Bam, ZVM active. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, if we want to link up to another system, of course, you can do VTAM vnet, dial, ID, OS2 serve PU. Yeah. We'll just cycle this here. Go ahead and cycle our OS2. And if all is well, oh, see, it doesn't like it. Alright, let's actually switch over to our VNC console and look at our OS2 server. Alright, so that was brash and instantaneous, and of course, this being VNC, you know, the mouse never works right. So let's take a look at our logical link configurations to the remote systems that we're able to talk to. So of course we have a Cisco router, and this right here is a byte swapped address and then the actual address. Do be mindful, if you're talking over token ring, you'll need something to, you're going to have to use a byte swapped address if you have a bridge, because of the Indianness difference. And now if we look at our VTAMLST system, bam, here's our remote address. Now, sometimes it's actually +1 on the MAC address. Watch out, that could be an issue. You may have to deal with that. High performance routing, it won't do any good. HPR is kind of broken on Communication Server 2. By the way, I recommend not running Communication Server 2 or the OS2 SNA stack or whatever you want to call it. It basically can run for about a month straight, and then you have to restart it. There's bugs in it, and there's also memory leak, so be mindful of that. So we're going to Control-A activate this, and you may notice it's not actually going to do anything, because if I switch back over to our Spiffy terminal, which apparently I have two of the same, because I somehow broke OBS here, you're going to see that it's still not entirely happy. So we're going to do VTAM vnet, dial, ID equals OS2 serve PU. This is supposed to link up, but apparently it's not. Sometimes what you have to do is deactivate it, and F5 refreshes this, by the way. Control B force drops it, and then we can do our cycle here, where we force it inactive, make sure it's good and dead, activate it, and then dial it. And then if the stars are aligned, or whatever the saying is, you know, there you go. So our connection is active. Easy as that. Now, generally speaking, I would say, there we go, and you see now I can see we're active. Of course, it's Control A on here to do that. And of course, there's our destination PU name. And if we do more, it'll tell us what our effective capacity is. You can set this, and this this corresponds to, I guess you'd call it, if you know Dijkstra's algorithm, if you have routing, there you go. This is literally it. You know, it's a real-life computer science class example. Security, non-secure. There's no real way to secure this. Is this branch extender? No. Also, my mouse cursor keeps rolling off this because the VNC mouse does not map to my real mouse. Oh, man. And we are not using CP sessions. We are not using high-performance routing. You're going to have multiple overlapping TGNs. Don't worry about it. Just do not define an actual sub-area TGN as 21 and you'll survive. We have 3 active sessions, so there is something that is using this for something. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to close this, because apparently this is still here. Communications Manager setup. Let's take a look at how you actually plug this stuff in. Okay, because this is relatively difficult to do. Also, this program here is called Display Active Configuration. Sorry, not Display Active Configuration, Subsystem Management. This thing we were looking at, this logical links thing, is Subsystem Management, and it's under the administration subfolder after you install CS2. Okay, so, by the way, don't use this. You know what you do? Oh man, this mouse is killing me. Go to Options, Configure any profile or feature. Etherand Network. Our adapter 0. What you have to do is you have to go into MPTS and add the 802.3 or 802.2 DLC data link control driver to this, and we can look at that, but you'll be able to figure it out. You just need to add that using MPTS, okay? Enterprise Extender, I'm not using EE. I have it enabled. It's just not really active. SNA local node characteristics. This is the other thing you need. There we go. Here's our ID block and ID num. Our node alias, which you can actually have the same. And this is a network node, meaning it will do some minimal routing. And here's our net ID and then our CP name. Activate Attach Manager Startup, please do. If not, nothing will work. Attach Manager means AppC. Okay, and then connections. Okay, this is where it matters. Set everything to host. Don't bother with to network node, not to end node, not to low entry node, just host. Make everything a host and your life will be much easier. So if we go down to our VMESA entry, this is obviously an Ethernet network. Our link name, VMESA. Activate startup, absolutely. Partner network ID, partner node name. This is not the host name, this is just a link name. You can call this whatever you want. You can call this Bob and it'll work just fine. Destination address, remote SAP. Remember, this is our 0004 thing in our RMAC perimeter. And of course, this is our remote destination address. Sometimes it needs to be +1. Also, I just randomized the MAC address for whatever reason it wanted to randomize it. Don't override anything. Additional perimeters. You can have a backup link. It doesn't really do anything. Make sure you enable append, because if you don't enable append, you're going to have a hard time getting anything to work. And then after this, we have a few other things. SNA features. This is your local LUs. These right here are for terminals. So just define a bunch of local LUs. Modes. These are here by default. Some of these are for like PC, AppC stuff. So like obviously these right here are classic PC entries. QPC sup. Welcome to AS400. Well, AS400 land. There you go. Transaction program definitions. If you want to be able to A-ping your system, this is what you plug in. Okay? A-ping-D, seamlib A-ping-D, continue, because we want this to be full screen, non-queued, attach manager started. Oops, I just clicked out of the VNC. So, yeah, this is basically how you get this. AFTPD, I'll just show this up. No, never mind. Before I break some. SNA, LUA APIs. Sorry. This is where you define your local LUs. This right here is for your terminals. The other was for AppC. This is for actual terminals. Because if you remember in our VTAMLST, underneath our RMAC, we had those LUs in the lock adder. This right here, here's your local address, and there they are. Okay, so these right here are 3270s. Now I hate this UI. This is some silly Java thing, I think it is. So it's kind of a mess, but there you go. Host link and then the LU name. Okay. TN3270 server definitions. create a pool, a workstation pool, assign these LUs to it, and then you can actually, if you want to, you can associate printer LUs. I recommend not doing that. And then TN3270E options. There you go. You may need to change some of those. Now, of course, when you create a pool, it's going to prompt you to specify what the port is that it runs on. So you'll be asked that. Ah, this mouse is killing me. And so there you go. You may need to change that at some point. Sockets over SNA, don't even bother with this, it's a nightmare. And that's basically it. That's how you configure this, is you literally just go to options, configuring, profile, or feature, and just go for it. Don't bother with this, it's ridiculous. No, because there's nothing to update. And we'll just close out of that. Okay, let's look at Windows NT4 server. Okay, I apologize for the ridiculous resolution here, but it is what it is. So we're actually up and running here. All you do is you set your local parameters here. So here's our network name, our control point name. That's it. That's all you got to say. For our VM ESA link, yeah, baby. I was so proud when I got this to work. I was like, oh man, we are rocking and rolling. Host system, you bet. Yep, okay. It's our link service. Don't worry, you can just plug it in and figure it out. Remote network address, there we go. Here's our local ID block ID num. VTAM doesn't really have such an analog, don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. Remote SAP address 4, so if you need to change that, there you go. Easy peasy. And if we need to set up an LU pool, you just do that there. Now, if I can get my mouse aligned a little bit better here, you can see that black dot to the bottom left. That's the actual VSC cursor. Let's see. CPI-C. This right here is AppC. As ridiculous as that is. You can have transaction program definitions, but it's a little hard. I wouldn't worry about it. If you can help yourself, don't worry about it. Here's our link to our Cisco system. Of course, this does actually have a set definition. Of course, this machine is also running DECnet. Of course, right? Let's see. SNA server tracing. Yes. If I can figure out where in the world you define a link, that would be wonderful. Oh man, I don't even remember where you define a link. Where is oh yeah. No, maybe. Connection. I actually don't remember where you define a link. I made this over a year and a half ago. This thing is antique. Anyway, you'll probably be able to figure it out. And of course, I gotta click the Windows button here because my mouse is terrible. Our SNA server configuration is... Oh yeah, you may need to run the setup. Yeah, that's right. That's where you define it, is in the setup thing. And of course, we also have our TN3270 admin. Of course, we don't have anything that's active and running right now. And of course, we do want this to work. So we're going to stop this. And then we'll stop that. And then we'll go back over to our VTAM shell. And we're going to attempt to queue it up. So VTAM vnet nat, ID equals NT4. Force it. Oh, actually, I don't need to do that. Look at that, we already got it. So if we go back over here, you'll see that if this thing would refresh, it's not going to refresh for a while. But it's allegedly up. Now, at this point, we should be able to connect to it. Let me just make sure that TCP/IP, TCP/IP is not functional on it right now. Let's pause and let's take a session look at going in through the OS2 SNA proxy. And while I would, unfortunately it's not going to work. We're having a little bit of a technical issue. I need to restart it because you can imagine how poorly behaved it is. But nonetheless, that's pretty much the gist of it. Actually, we can look at a Windows 2000 host integration server just for fun, but it's basically the exact same. And of course, with all good things on VM, remember to set, run on, and disk on, or just disk. And that's basically going to do it for the SNA guide here. It's not too terribly difficult to do. It just takes a lot of copy and paste and a whole lot of troubleshooting. You're going to want to track down some older manuals. They're available on all the popular archive sites. Just look for like the MVS or the VM or the OS390 manual collection CDs. You're going to need Book Manager read, but once you got that, which you can still find on the IBM site, you'll be rocking and rolling. That's going to wrap it up for this one. Good luck out there, be safe and good luck.